Welcome back. So in this video, we're going to take the first step towards learning SQL, which is the language for interacting with databases that we will be learning throughout the course. And in particular, we're going to cover the very basics of how to use SQL to select data from a table, which incidentally involves a keyword called select. They keep it pretty intuitive for you. So let's get started. So what is SQL exactly? SQL stands for Structured Query Language. It is a programming language which is used to interact with relational databases, which are far and away the most popular type of database in the world today. Again, for now, I know we mentioned that term before. Don't worry about exactly what a relational database is. Just know that it is the most common database that you will find out there, and SQL is the language for interacting with relational databases. With SQL, you can create, you can modify, delete, query, and analyze data in relational databases, which if you're a data analyst or a data scientist, these types of tasks are going to make up a lot of what you do every day. A lot of the machine learning algorithms and charting and visualizations kind of get the glory, but if you look at the amount of time a data scientist or a data analyst spends just querying and cleaning data, transforming it into something that's meaningful and presentable, that's what takes up the bulk of your time. And SQL is the tool that we'll use predominantly to do that. So SQL, it turns out, is not a single unified language. There are actually, you could say, dialects of SQL, different flavors of the language, so to speak. And they vary depending on the particular database that you're using. In this course, we're using Microsoft SQL Server, but if we were using Oracle or MySQL or PostgreSQL, some aspects of the language would be slightly different. But the good news is, for the most part, they're the same. There are a few, you could say, bells and whistles, a few extra features that each database implementation adds to the language to try to make their implementation the best. But if you learn and master SQL on one database system, you will be able to learn another implementation of SQL very easily. I've done the same thing myself in the past. I started with Oracle, and then I moved to SQL Server with very little difficulty at all. So now we'll dig into the really fun stuff, which is selecting data. This is where we're actually going to start writing code. So let's just go ahead and dive into our human resources.employee table. Now, I've already shown you a little magic trick for previewing a table by right-clicking and selecting the top 1,000 rows, so we can start there. It's pretty much the easiest way to just start out querying a table if you know you want something from it. So this code, while it was automatically generated by the editor by SQL Server Management Studio, is totally valid code, and you could have written this exact code in a brand new editor window and it would work just the same. In fact, let's go ahead and do that with some help from copy and pasting. I'll click New Query, and then because I hate typing, let me just copy this and I will change it slightly. Instead of selecting all these columns, maybe I don't care about row GUID, modified date. Maybe I don't care about business entity ID. Maybe I just want those columns. Now I'll run this. Oop, got to get rid of that first comma. And there we are. Only the columns that I specified that I wanted, as opposed to all the columns that are listed over here. So just selecting data from a table is as simple as writing the keyword select, having a from, which is the table that the data is coming from, and then listing out the columns that you want to see in the order that you want to see them, separated by commas. That's it. It's that simple. Obviously, you can keep adding or taking away columns, and you can also reorder the columns in the select statement, and that will change your output. So for example, if I wanted login ID to appear before national ID number, I would just move that around like that. You don't need a comma before the very first item in your select list. You just need the commas in between the column names. Now I'll rerun. Right now you see national ID number is before login ID, but after I run, login ID is now before national ID number. The last thing we'll cover before we conclude is the top 1,000 piece of this query. So it doesn't have to be top 1,000. It can be top really anything. Now, if you say select top 10,000 and the table only has 290 rows, you're still only going to get 290 rows, but that's fine. It won't throw an error. But this is mostly useful if you just want to take a sample of the data in a table of a certain size. Maybe by default, when you right-click a table, SQL gives you the option to select the top 1,000 rows, but if you want to, you could choose the top 50 rows. Or you could choose the top 1 rows. That's simple. And again, we're going to get into much more complicated methods of selecting particular rows from a table that are more intelligent and based on criteria versus just kind of randomly grabbing the top 10 or so off the top of the table. But for now, this is an excellent way to sample data from a table. So up next, we're going to cover a few more fundamentals of selecting data from a table without applying any criteria to the rows that come back, to the rows that are returned by our queries, but that will set us up for actually applying criteria, applying conditional logic to the rows that are returned, which gets really important when your tables go from maybe a few hundred rows in size to a few thousand or even a few million. But that is for another day. For now, congratulate yourself on writing your very first SQL today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.